Welcome to the MTSS Monday Minute for June 27th, 2022. Again, we will use the video framework of exploration, perspectives and resources, and wrap up. For this exploration, I want you to consider this. All interventions are strategies, but not all strategies are interventions. You guessed it, today's Monday Minute will be all about interventions. So, a very common pitfall to efficient MTSS is when we answer this question, what interventions have you tried? And when we answer that question with practices that are not interventions, we create a couple of issues in our full scale MTSS. So, why is this an issue? Well, there's probably a multiple reasons why this can be an issue, but I want to talk about the three that I think are important for us to consider at this point in time. And the first is that interventions generally must meet two criteria before that they can be considered interventions. The second is that when we misinterpret certain strategies as interventions, we lose valuable intervention opportunity and students can actually fall farther behind. And then three, some strategies that could benefit all kids are mislabeled and thus are reserved for struggling learners, which can create barriers to access that all students can or could benefit from. So I want you to take a moment to take a look at the list below. And what you see here is a list of some of the most common items that educators will list as interventions that they have tried, particularly in Tier 1 and sometimes in Tier 2. And most of this should probably look pretty familiar to you. Things like, praise or immediate feedback, seat close to the teacher, make positive personal comments when a child complies or shows interest, advanced warning of transitions, physical proximity, frequent check ins, clear expectations and consequences, reinforce classroom rules consistently, monitor tolerance and watch for signs of frustration, provide alternatives when appropriate, designate a cool off location, avoid power struggles, frequent communication with parents, speak privately to child about appropriate behaviors, provide opportunities for movements and breaks. And I'm sure you can think of others that you have used in addition to some of these. And not to say that you've used all of these, but this is just an example of the most common ones that I've seen on MTSS referral forms, RTI referral forms, even special education referral forms. So, a vital component to an effective MTSS is to create environments that are designed to prevent school failure, plus provide timely intervention when students demonstrate a need for intensified approaches in academics and or behavior. And some of the items in the previous list are strategies that should be incorporated into a well-designed preventative environment, and some of them are strategies to use with any student at any time to allow them to be successful. Almost none of them, however, are interventions. Now, there may be a few of them that could be considered interventions. So, you're going to want to listen to the next section of the video because I'm going to ask you to go back to that list and see if you can point out the interventions and the non-interventions. So, what is an intervention? Well, when it comes to academic and behavioral interventions, it's important to not confuse prevention strategies with intervention strategies. So, a prevention strategy is something that prevents the need for an intervention, and an intervention is something that allows students to remain in the prevention environment as long as possible. So, characteristics of an intervention there are two. The first is an intervention is instruction that has been narrowed down into a small component of a usually larger component or concept. And two, an intervention also increases the amount of time a student is exposed to a concept or microconcept. So in summary, an intervention is a strategy that has two components, narrow focused and increased time. So, based on that criteria, that an intervention is narrowed focused and increased time, Let's take a look at our list again. Some of these items could be considered interventions because they increase the focus of a concept and increase the time of a particular concept or content or strategy. And so, for example, frequent check ins. Well, frequent check ins could be considered an intervention because when you frequently check in with a student, you are most likely looking to point out particular parts of an assignment or of a task you've asked them to do. You're assessing how well they've understood, say, the directions or something like that. And then you may re explain it to them and give them an opportunity to try again, thereby increasing the amount of time that they have had to be successful in that moment. Reinforcing classroom rules consistently. Yep, that could also be considered an intervention. It's probably more of a preventative measure, but when you consider that you may have already taught the classroom rules and that the classroom rules and routines are running consistently, then reinforcing them and using reminder techniques and using them consistently over time can, in fact, be considered an intervention because every time you provide access to the reinforcement or the reminder of that particular rule or expectation of the classroom, you are potentially narrowing the part of the expectation that you would like the student to engage in. And by connecting with them one on one, you are increasing the time that they have to consider that choice, to consider that expectation, and then to therefore comply with the expectation. But there are others here that are not considered interventions and could just be, a really good strategy that's used in a good preventative environment. For example, avoiding power struggles. Well, how would avoiding power struggles be considered an intervention? Does it narrow in focus that the student has with a particular concept? Does it increase in time that a student has with a particular concept? If you can't answer yes to both of those questions, then it's most likely not an intervention, but rather a strategy that can be used or could be used in a preventative measure to keep a student away from even needing an intervention to begin with. So, setting up your classroom or setting up your structures to allow for avoiding power struggles would be a preventative measure rather than an interventive measure. I'm not sure that's even a word. So to wrap up, I would invite you to take a look at the strategies in the list provided, and can you rule out some more of the items as prevention strategies rather than interventions? And how could you support, your answer? And what strategies are not on this list that you have used as an intervention that might need to be reconsidered? And you may want to find an opportunity to collaborate and find a colleague to review this video and this list together and discuss with each other whether certain items on the list are interventions or non interventions. And don't forget to get your minutes counted. After you're done working through the list to find interventions and non interventions, leave a comment below to let us know what you would remove from the list and how you got to that answer.